Everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub. If you guys are on YouTube and you're checking us out in our new portrait mode, let us know what you think. If you like it, if you don't like it, I don't know if you have any comments on it. It's a new thing for us. We're rolling it out today. So if you guys are on YouTube in portrait mode, let us know what you think. Having said that, everyone, welcome to Manufacturing Hub. This is episode 258. My name is Dave Griffith. This guy over here is my co-host, Vlad Romanov. Every week, twice this week, but just about every week, we talk about interesting industrial automation manufacturing topics. Most weeks, you guys are going to find us with a guest. This week, we had an episode which was with Siemens, episode 257, which was like our proved it, post-prove it recap episode with them. So we had a couple of guests on with Andreas and Caleb. Today, you guys get Vlad and I talking about Hannover, talking about trade shows, talking about industrial AI, answering your questions and more. So if you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Either way, please feel free to go say hi, drop comments in the chat. Our top platforms that people are chatting on are typically LinkedIn and then YouTube. You guys can find Vlad, myself, and Manufacturing Hub across all of those. So feel free to go drop a comment in the chat, say hi, let us know what you're doing. If you've got thoughts or comments or questions, please feel free to go ahead and do that as well. But without further ado, everyone officially welcome to Manufacturing Hub. Vlad, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dave. How goes
Anytime, Vlad. Anytime. It goes good. It goes good. So you just came back from Hannover Messe last week. Man, it's been a long week. And I didn't have multiple 10-hour flights. But it has been a long week. You were at Hannover for the first time last week. Let's go ahead and jump in, get your thoughts, reactions, impressions of the show.
Yeah, so let me just give a little bit of context for those that may not be familiar with what it is. So Hannover Messe is one of the, if not the largest, industrial automation and manufacturing show, at least in Europe, right? I don't want to say if it's the entire world, but it is usually held or always held in Hanover, Germany. And so this year, it was last week. I was there for the entirety of the show, minus the Friday on which I flew out. So it is a very large trade show with multiple buildings. You can obviously go back to the website and find the exact map, locations of the booths if you're interested. But every vendor that I know of was at Hannover Messe. I would say minus maybe some very small startups. Everyone that you would know: Siemens, Rockwell, IFM, Keyence, right? You name it. And so for me, it was the first time attending. I know that, Dave, you have been in the past, but for me, it was my first Hanover Messe. And so, of course, I do have some interesting takeaways about the trade show, about maybe the European market, about what has been presented by the vendors, on which I will touch on a little bit in, and then we're going to have a deeper conversation when it comes to the industrial automation and manufacturing space in general. So I flew in on Monday morning and I flew back on Friday. So I basically spent almost 4 days at the trade show. I flew in and immediately took the taxi because the Monday and Tuesday there was a strike in Germany, but took a taxi to the fair, which was relatively easy to reach. By usually, again, there is going to be a train that goes from the airport all the way down to where the halls are at, but ultimately you can take an Uber, you can take a taxi, no issues on that front. So, as I've mentioned, you have to navigate between a variety of basically very large buildings that are logically separated. So, right, so there's going to be a section for some of the largest vendors in our industry, there's a section for startups in our industry, there's going to be a section which hosts people, or I guess companies, from different countries. There was a Canadian delegation, there was a Brazilian delegation, a Chinese one, and a lot of other different countries, Poland, right? So just to name a couple, under which you could find companies of different sizes from that specific country. And so, in a very general or broad statement, I would say that the trade show resembles what you would expect. You're going from booth to booth, you're talking to the different parties, but ultimately it is larger, right? So, any trade shows that I have been to, at least on the North American side, have generally been smaller in size as well as in scope. There's not always an area, let's say, for startups or for specific countries, whereas Hanover had the, I would say, the venue, but also the foresight to include a lot of such activities. But in a very general sense, I don't think it was that much different, besides, like I said, the presence of different delegations and maybe different sizes of companies from your typical trade show. In terms of takeaways for me, as I would want to say, as Vlad, right? So I had multiple meetings set up for the first 2.5 days. I had a couple of dinners set up as well with different groups. And so my goal was generally to reconnect with some of the parties that I do work with, some of which is remote. And in certain instances, it would be them basically working on projects in North America and thus utilizing me as a resource. That being said, on the last, I would say, on basically Wednesday afternoon and Thursday, I walked around the trade show floor to learn more about the companies that I'm not as familiar with. Obviously, I know of their name, but ultimately just wanted to explore, understand what kind of new technologies they're working on, and some of the key platforms that I plan to potentially include in some of my work. And happy to get into that, but I'm assuming we'll encompass that in the state of the industry. But it was just an interesting and I would say more relaxing day and a half to explore and talk from a, how would I say it, not a pressure standpoint, right? Just to discover some new tools, some new technologies, what's happening in the industry. So all of that was a lot of fun before flying back to my home base, which is in Montreal.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really good. I guess for some context for the listeners, and you had made comments of small booths and large booths, Vlad, but
Mhm.
you see everything from the 10-foot wide, 10-foot-ish deep booths that you see at lots of other trade shows to, I think Siemens is typically the largest set of booths. I think they're typically like 2,000, 2,500 square meters, so like 20,000 square feet or 30,000 square feet.
Mhm.
There are that is the kind of primary show when I consider it, that you'll also see groups doing double deckers, right? So you'll see the 1,000 square feet or 2,000 square feet, and then they'll go build a mezzanine level of another 1,000 or 2,000 square feet. Sometimes it is for their own groups internally to take breaks. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's to take meetings. Sometimes it's for combination of all of those things. But you certainly see many of the wildest, most expensive booths at Hanover than you will see just about anywhere else.
Yeah, and look again, maybe to give additional context for those that have not been to Hannover Messe, I think that you see all sorts of flavors and types of booths. I've mentioned this a little bit earlier. A startup could have something as small as just a stand, right?
Mhm,
Which is not even a 10 feet by 10 feet booth. It's just part of a larger entity, like
mhm,
the one that I mentioned from different countries. And all they have room for is basically maybe a laptop and a screen as well as a
mhm.
banner to explain their solution. And then
Yep.
you, on the other hand side, you see massive booths from, again, like it was Siemens,
Mhm,
Phoenix Contact, Beckhoff, IFM, right? So a lot of the very known players in our industry that just have a ton of materials to present. And of course, the context also differs when you have perhaps a more software solution for our industry versus a hardware solution, or when you're maybe a consultant, right? So you also saw the Big Four, you also saw some of the MBBs, right? You saw
mhm,
Bain, McKinsey. I spoke to BCG. There was obviously Deloitte, EY, KPMG. So all of the consulting players as well. And so, of course, in some of their booths, you could see maybe a solution partner, but as you've mentioned as well, a lot of space for just meetings, the ability to sit down. Some of the booths had presentation stages where you had a series of different conversations that they were inviting other individuals to. They were doing demos, right? So they had their mini stages set up and everything in between, right? There was even the German military, for example, that had an exhibition of a tank, a helicopter that was hanging from the ceiling, and a couple of BMW off-road bikes basically. And so I spoke to them a little bit. I'm not sure what their scope was, but I'm assuming they are trying to potentially recruit and or help on the manufacturing side, as I'm assuming it is a big part of their responsibility. So again, just a lot of different flavors of booths. It's important to be cognizant. Like I said, you can see companies that are purely software based, right? I didn't mention the hyperscaler perhaps ecosystem. So you had your Microsofts, your AWS, of course, present there as well. What I thought was interesting, right, and some of it was, I would say, better executed than some of the others. For example, the Microsoft booth had an example of a Crohn's filler. And if you're familiar with Crohn's, it's a very large supplier, again, in the food and bev, specifically of filling machines. And they had a demo where they've tied some of that data into the cloud ecosystem. But ultimately, it's a partnership that is not only, the booth is not only a software based solution, it also encompasses this massive filling machine, which obviously I thought was a missed opportunity, that it wasn't filling the actual bottles, but you could walk up and get a water bottle with Crohn's from a water fountain on the side
Okay.
filled. So anyways, there were interesting, like concepts like that, similar to, let's say, like BCG had a pick and place application that they were either selling or working on with a specific partner that they were showcasing in their booth. So it's not as empty as some of the other vendors, where again it's just seating and of course meeting arrangements that could be had within the booth.
I like that, Vlad. I'm currently picturing you trying to sell automation solutions to the German military, and it just makes me smile. It just makes me smile. So, before we go and talk about the general state and what we've seen within the industry so far this year and our expectations moving forward, any major themes throughout the entirety of Hanover? Was it everyone is talking and using AI? Were there other themes or sub themes that you have found?
Well, of course, as you can imagine, everyone's using AI.
Mhm.
I made a comment to a couple of groups, right? So the comment was last year when you and I were at Automate or at ICC even, I think it was still novel to see MCP servers, or it was novel to see a very well executed chatbot. It seems that everyone has, to an extent, caught up at this point, right? And everyone has some flavor of AI. And so for me, the general sentiment, right, when I was talking to some of these groups, is that the end customer is no longer going to keep asking, do you have something on the AI side? But we're going to go back to the more broader question, which is, how do you solve a specific problem for my manufacturing facility? Right. So, whereas maybe again, going a year back, everyone was asking, well, are you using AI? What's available in I think everyone has gotten to a point where they have some AI, right? Of course, you can try and understand the nuances with a different group, but the question still remains, which is, how do you solve a problem using your product for my specific use case? And so I think there were more and more conversations. Again, there's a theme of AI, but it felt that outside of certain specific applications, people were going back to asking the questions, well, how is this helping me solve a specific problem, perhaps using AI or perhaps just using the platform?
I I agree. I've certainly seen that a lot. I've certainly seen the conversations shift significantly away from just tell me about your AI
Hmm.
to how do we solve specific problems. And maybe more specifically than we need to solve a problem to do some of these projects. It's how are you using AI to reduce the time and reduce my costs for these projects? And so I have certainly seen the novelty of just kind of raw AI or raw chatbots wear off. I read somewhere, and I feel bad that I can't go pull up the link right now, but basically it says something to the effect of no one wants a 2010 product that now has a chatbot, right? If it's still a 2010 product, no one is particularly interested in that. So I think all of that is, very good. Talking about kind of the state of our industry, let's go dive into AI, right? So we just had a theme talking about industrial AI. We had 5 really good conversations surrounding that. I know we've got at least 1 or 2 more planned before we get to automate, and then I'm sure we're going to have a lot of conversations, and everyone is going to be showing off their AI solutions or their solutions that have AI inside of them while we are at automate. Are you seeing? Are you having the conversations? Are you seeing that conversations are moving towards groups like not Fortune 500, but into kind of smaller groups? I mean, Fortune 2000 is still very large, but into just smaller groups going and using and deploying AI. Are you seeing that they're kind of pulling back? Where are you seeing? How do you see that within industry?
Yeah, so look, my general or broader opinion of AI has not changed as a result of the conversations that we've had. I remain positively skeptical. The conversations that I have been having with end users have been, I want to say, the word is not necessarily underwhelming, right? But I continue to be surprised that they are that far behind when it comes to just general AI adoption, right? And that's not even talking about on the plant floor, but typically what I'm seeing is that a lot of them have gotten access to Copilot, right? Because they are running on the Microsoft suite of products in general. And so they are writing better emails, right? They are taking better meeting notes. But ultimately, when it comes to utilizing AI to accelerate projects, it still feels that there is some gains to be had on that front, right? And what I mean by that is, again, I almost separate this as the person that's within the company using AI to automate some of their actual workflows or deliverables, and then bringing in other vendors that incorporate AI in their tools to, again, as you've mentioned, maybe shorten the delivery time or maybe add some kind of a chatbot or data layer or UI screens. But basically, where I see the current state of AI being in real use cases is people are automating some fairly simple tasks using AI, but in my opinion, they're just scratching the surface, and everyone's still trying to understand how do we do this better, right? And that's not to say that there aren't complexities. It doesn't mean that just because everyone's going to be given Claude Code, for example, or Gemini, they're going to get exponentially better. I'm just saying that they are at the level where everyone is still just experimenting with the, I would call, consumer based AI models for like putting in data and accomplishing relatively simple tasks. What are you seeing post, I guess, the conversations we've been having?
I I would generally agree. I had a revelation, and I don't remember if it was last week or if it was a couple of weeks ago. When we had a brief break during the manufacturing hub on Wednesday afternoons, but I had this revelation that a lot of the conversations that we're having, a lot of the conversations that we're having on this show about people who are leveraging AI, and you and I talking about it, and then going and continuing to have other conversations, it is like very much like the 1% or the 1/10 of 1% of if you are doing really anything, or automating any workflows, or going and building a series of subagents in order to go expedite a particular workflow in order to go get answers back. You are at the very bleeding edge of consumer AI, right? And
Hmm.
th- of that 1% of the entirety of the population, there's a huge difference between, you know, every time you go higher, every 10%, every 10 basis points of that top 1% are people who are almost exponentially doing more and more within some of these tools. And some of them are building llama local models. And some of the people, like when we had a conversation with Constantine a month or 6 weeks ago, talking about pulling and going and leveraging some of those, what are those, DSG Sparks on the NVIDIA side.
Like the
Uh,
Dell computers, yeah. Mhm.
Yep, absolutely. Just going and watching people invest that time and money in order to go build their own models, and then get into the how many tokens per second are each of these, and how many of these boxes do I need to pre-fill my box that I'm using to go have models in order to get to any semblance of speed. Those are just so far on the outside of the conversations that we're basically having in the rest of the world and the rest of our lives. And very much to the point that we just said, of at the end of the day, a chat bot or just saying, I have AI, maybe it got you in the door a year ago. Maybe it will still get you in the door today, but without being able to solve a tangible problem, and hopefully being able to solve a tangible problem at a much faster rate, or at a faster rate, leveraging some of these tools, people are not spending a bunch of time and money on the end user side going and doing one of these just to say, hey, I have an AI, right? Like, and so I,
Yeah.
I think that is important. And it's been a slow shift from we need to solve solutions to let's go explore this AI, and now back towards the we need to solve these solutions, but how do we solve these, or how do we solve these problems? What do the solutions look like that are inclusive of AI? And to me, that seems like it was always going to end up there. It seems like an almost foregone conclusion. Like, you have a shiny new toy, and everyone wants to see the shiny new toy. But now that we have all seen the toy just needs to go and do the work, right? Like, the car needs to go get you from point A to point B. The new laptop needs to go hit all of the compute in order to go do all of the things that it needs to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I agree. I think it'll be interesting. I will be particularly interested to see if automate this year, how focused we are when it comes to solutions that incorporate AI, or if we are still in the cycle of everyone is showing off AI. I felt like when we were at Prove It earlier this year, Vlad, it was still very much in the everyone is showing off AI. Everyone needed to have a chatbot. There wasn't the innovation was very much kind of stagnated towards the middle of everyone has now built the things that we've all seen over the course of the last 12 months. How many groups are going to go take it a step further, or three steps further? It will be interesting to see the direction that goes with automate. It'll be interesting to see how many people are not necessarily showcasing AI. Maybe they're showcasing solutions to problems. Maybe they're leveraging AI. It will be interesting to see the direction that some of these groups take. I feel like some of the times, if you're being shown AI, you're going to have to ask the questions, how does it solve this particular problem? And how does it solve this problem faster and in a less expensive way than if I were to do it the way I would have done it a year ago?
Yeah, and look, to be honest with you, I guess a couple of points. So, number one, I have yet to hear of a case where a large enough project was approved on AI, like we have AI basis alone, right? Every
Mhm.
time that I have at least been in business cases, there needed to be a fairly tangible business value at the end of a project quantifiable and, again, benchmarked against a certain risk, because obviously AI is still a new technology, so it may or may not work out, but it needed to be showcased what is the ROI. So although some of the conversations would start as, are you using AI, or how can you use AI to help us? Usually
Mhm.
those conversations would just go into multiple cycles, where at the end of the day, someone would have to say as to why this solution and using AI was going to deliver a specific value. So to me,
Mhm.
people that were kicking tires on certain solutions at even trade shows or in conversations, asking the broad question of, do you have AI, or can we have AI, were really probably not that successful at getting funding
Mhm.
unless there was a proven problem that was going to solve using that AI, right? And of course, again, I've not heard of all those conversations, but I think it's very difficult to sell on AI basis alone. Number two, this kind of maybe like side story, but relevant to the point of AI, really surprised me. So a lot of times when we had conversations, including the one with Constantine, the concern on the end user side is that the data or the intellectual property would be utilized in a basically open model, right? That can be then ingested. And again, obviously, we don't know if it can be queried against, but that data is now open to the entire world. So, what surprised me at a recent customer site visit was that, well, number one, like I said a little bit earlier, they only had access to Copilot. So there was a task which basically involved validating some of the software at the PLC and SCADA layer for a substantial system, right? And so that task is fairly monotonous. You basically have to make sure that the tags are being passed, that the message instructions are constructed as per the functional spec for that equipment, and you're just cross-referencing, making sure that on both sides everything is implemented as expected by the systems integrator. Now, of course, looking at automation, the shortcut is, I'm going to give you this entire program, of course, in text format. Can you find these series of tags? And whether or not, it's easier to control F and then find the specific tag that's in the spreadsheet, or use an LLM, is a separate question. But it came down to, like me asking the end user, hey, I believe that there's going to be a faster way of doing this. You have a spreadsheet of tags that need to be tested. You have both locations of, like tags. Can we automate this using an LLM? And the answer that I was expecting was that we need to set up something internally, similar um, to what we discussed with Constantine. And to my surprise, they kind of just said like, well, if you want, just put it in ChatGPT and it should be fine. There's like no issues with this as far as we know, at least for now, right? So they're at a stage where they basically have no concerns. And again, to be honest with you, it is just boilerplate PLC code. So in theory, there's really no IP, but it really surprised me, because I thought I would need to bring in these, like Dell IPCs, and then start setting up these GPUs to make sure that we process that in house. But for whatever reason, I guess they are okay with using these open or commercially available models. So I guess what I'm also imagining, because obviously I'm on the technical side and overseeing some of these projects from a technical standpoint, I can only imagine that the individuals in the finance and legal departments are probably also utilizing not necessarily just Copilot that they have on a separate tenant, but are probably utilizing other models as well that are, again, to a degree better. So I'm curious to see from that standpoint where the industry ends up, and as far as like privacy goes for these entities.
I I agree. I think it's an interesting point. One of the things, one of the areas that we talk with on the Kaplan side with our clients is data governance. That is an entire conversation that maybe we will have on the show later in the year.
Hmm.
But in short, data governance, especially on the OT side, historically doesn't exist, right? Like data governance on the IT side, data governance on the enterprise wide side are very standard, very normal things and documents and standards to go and have in place and to be able to go ahead and test against and to allow everyone to know what this looks like almost to a T. Once you get away from those carpeted areas onto up the plant floor, no one has ever even pondered the thought of data governance. So when we talk about data governance, we talk about needing to extend it to the OT side as we're going to leverage some of these AI tools or as we're working on AI enablement. That is a key and core and critical step in order to be able to be successful so that there can at least be a corporate wide answer on yes or no models wise. Now, when you get away from the free or freemium versions of ChatGPT or Claude or other things along those lines, once you get to the teams or enterprise side, you in theory can have your own environment, and in theory the information that you put in your own corporate private environment will not be shared and nothing will be used to train the models. As of my last reading of the terms and conditions of Claude and ChatGPT, both of them said that. Having said that, as to what is or is not the truth, it is a completely different question and conversation. For me, as recently as a year and a half ago, I was surprised how many people were moving away from Googling things to chat GPTing things. And I believe I've said similar comments and conversations on the show. So I feel like the people, and specifically the people or the organizations who are moving away from Googling to looking for an answer to asking ChatGPT or asking Claude, are going to be much more apt to go leverage some of these models for some of these tools. And in my experience, it's either typically an absolutely not, we don't want it there, or kind of just shrugging your shoulders and saying, sure, let's go use the tool in order to go make our process faster and easier. Now, I agree with you, Vlad. There is a question as to does Control F copy paste get you to a point specifically that you're talking faster or slower? It probably really depends upon the volume, right? Like if you need to do it 3 times, probably just go in Control F. If we need to do it 10,000 times, then that is a different question entirely. When it comes to number of tags as you're going down the commissioning standpoint, there is still some validation that one's going to have to do on the back end as a human because they are probabilistic LMM models. And so that there's still some validation that needs to be done. But if it can go save you a not insignificant period of time, I'm seeing more and more people who are interested or at least more apt to go down the path of saying yes to that. I feel like that brings up a really good point. You had talked about changes in the system integrated landscape. Are you seeing changes in the systems integrated landscape based upon these tools? What are you seeing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly right. And obviously that was just one example of how AI can be utilized during the systems integration or one of the workflows. But ultimately, a systems integrator is going to put I would say, in a broader sense, a connection between a variety of different applications and, of course, software and hardware, then validate said software that they've written to connect these systems and then commission them for the customer, right? And so everyone, I would say, in the general SI community is trying to figure out where can the savings be had when it comes to AI, right? And I've seen some examples from groups that are working on automating some of the drawings, right, that you need on the electrical side. I've seen certain groups try or automating or and trying to automate some of the aspects of translating electrical drawings into a starting point on the PLC side for programming said system. And of course, some of them will advertise that they have been getting much further along than some of the other groups, right? And some groups will or are tackling the challenge, have raised significant capital for building out entire PLC programs based on functional specifications, right? So there's a lot of different areas, and if you're familiar with the general, I would say, workflow of a systems integrator, can probably understand how there's different impacts AI is having on all of those workflows. Now, there's a conversation to be had as to who is going to benefit on that side, if the savings are going to be passed on to the end customer, or if those savings are going to be eaten up by the integrator, right, and absorbed into just a higher margin. Now, of course, I say all of this with a grain of salt because, again, even to the example that I gave a little bit earlier, again, if you spend the time auditing that kind of a system, you need to be, to an extent, 100% accurate. Now, of course, errors may happen, but you have a sign off sheet where you're marking down, yes, we have audited this logic. Yes, it's going to function as expected. There's going to be some nuances in the logic. Again, how well AI may or may not pick it up is a whole other question. But then it becomes a question of, let's say it took us 4 weeks to get all of that all said and done on the validation side. Do we now take 4 weeks to validate, but also spend a couple of weeks writing the proper tools? Again, because I've seen a lot of demos, right? And so in this specific instance, the software is massive, right? This is a really big monolith, for better or worse. So you cannot just simply, for context purposes, just put it inside of an LLM and call it all done, right? There's going to be issues with that approach. So you need to spend some time thinking what is the better approach, and to your point, what are the errors or the problems that will result as because of hallucinations, right? So if you're not going to get the 100% accuracy, well, now you have to re-review everything, and at that point you may have as well like spent a time looking at those tags yourself, right? There's other use cases, right? So I've been, for example, taking screenshots of certain screens and helping or getting help from AI to maybe reposition things or redesign things. I've also been getting help when it comes to, let's say, drawings that are not digitally searchable. So you can simply take a screenshot and you can, for example, if you are familiar with IO lists of PLCs, and if you're working on a conversion of a very old machine, you can just screenshot all of it. You can paste it into an LLM, and it's going to give you a up-to-date bill of materials, again, depending on your setup. So there's a lot of different use cases for systems integrators, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that the ones that can become more efficient, again, will probably capture some of that value in the next 6 months to maybe 2, 3 years. And I would assume that at that point, the playing field will level off, and then we'll see again maybe a pass on of some of those savings to the customer in order to win those projects.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. I think it's an interesting thought. I would say that groups and people who are able to leverage AI as tools within systems integration are going to be able to capture that value, at least in the short term. As to if they're able to capture it in the long term or not, still remains to be seen.
Yep.
The conversation and the testing that we're doing internally on the Kaplan side, we are finding that, similar to your point, Vlad, is that if you're a senior developer, a senior engineer, someone who understands what they're doing, there is a significant opportunity, a significant boost that those individuals can get if they're already doing a good job. And you can go through the process of speeding up what they do. You can go through the process of increasing the value of the output. You can go through the process of standardizing a lot of that. Having said that, and what I've said for, I don't know, at least the last year, you run into the issue of what happens when you don't have senior developers, what happens when you run out of senior developers, what happens especially for some of these smaller integrators of, Are they always constantly churning junior developers to create senior developers, and those senior developers are leaving because all of these other groups have other more different tools? So I think that is another very long question and series of conversations, but not continuing to build the base of the people who are going to continue to do the work could certainly lead us to a very poor point within integration and within lots of industries. Having said that, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was workforce development or workforce redevelopment. With, I suppose, the economy as a whole, but also with the onslaught of artificial intelligence, we're seeing lots of software engineers, we're seeing lots of project managers and product managers, and lots of middle management, and also a lot of IT as a whole, finding themselves no longer in a position to go have a job. All of the FAANG, all of the tech companies we've seen have huge layoffs and continue to have huge layoffs as they go and continue to invest in data centers and other things as opposed to going and investing in people. So I think we're going to see a not insignificant need for workforce redevelopment when it comes to that. Another one of the challenges that I had called out, now I have found very interesting, is UPS. So the package delivery organization, the folks in the brown, they recently renegotiated their union contracts with the drivers, and as part of that, had a significant payout for a subset of those drivers. I think if my memory serves correctly, it was about $150,000 per driver. So
Why is
allowing
that?
people.
What justifies that? Like,
Well,
drivers.
my understanding is they want to and or need to reduce the workforce. I don't know how much, and beyond that, I don't know how much of that was based upon the new union contracts. I don't know how much of that is based upon what their projections look like, redeliveries going forward. I don't know how much of that is Amazon packages going to UPS or not going through UPS. I don't know what that particularly looks like. All I can say is they are removing 10,000 or tens of thousands of drivers. And some of it is particularly interesting because it's people who have 30, 35 years in, and they're like, yes, I'll go take another year of salary. I will go retire and sail off into the sunset of retirement. And some of the other side is people who are still relatively early in their career saying, man, it's been a really tough 5 years, 10 years that I've been working with this group. If they're going to go pay me some money, I'm going to go take a year or a couple of years worth of salary. I'm going to go do some retraining. I am going to go do something else with my life. So I think it's particularly interesting that we're seeing people who have significantly manual labor, like on the UPS side, but also people who have significantly insignificant amounts of manual labor when it comes to software developers or FAANG or a lot of the IT folks that we've seen getting laid off. And so we'll have a very large swath of people who need to do some workforce redevelopment in order to figure out where they want to end up as they re-enter the workforce, as entire swaths of jobs are no longer necessarily going to be there.
Yeah, and look, I think it's an interesting dilemma because it seems that people are, I would say there's a lot of openings on the company side when it comes to, I would say, more manual tasks, right? And I guess I am surprised that you have found an article where UPS is laying off specifically drivers.
Mhm.
I would have imagined they would lay off some kind of analytics people that do supply chain management that is now automated via AI. So I would have to read and maybe understand that reasoning a little bit better. But it seems to me that there is no shortage of manual work, but there still is a problem, I guess, maybe to reskill individuals into that kind of work. And to be honest with you, I, to an extent, do believe that some of it is because of AI, but I also think that since even pre-COVID, I think that the general landscape of software engineering, right, which obviously is within the field of AI that has experienced massive layoffs, has been over popularized, right? Like what I mean by that is in the early 2000s, when we saw the internet boom, I think that software engineering became a very popular profession, and rightfully so, because it is a fairly complex, I would say, science slash art, depending on where you get your degree. However, I think from the early, or I would say mid 2000s to maybe up till COVID, I think that a lot of hiring was based on the high salaries that the profession commanded, right? So there was simply way too many engineers that entered the workforce. You could learn software engineering or computer science if you wish from a boot camp, from an online website. It was relatively easy to gain the skills, but I think it's still people underestimate how difficult it is to progress, um, of being a good engineer, right? So I guess all that I'm trying to say is I do believe that a lot of it is impacted because of AI, but I also believe that many of those companies have simply overhired, and now there is a correction that we are seeing in the general market as we're experiencing some of these shifts. But I think to an extent it was unavoidable. When it comes to industrial automation, again, I think that we are slower to feel some of those changes, but at the same time, control systems engineering, for those that have obviously spent the years in the field, is a lot more than just writing software. A lot of the value is not necessarily is in programming a PLC. The value is really in understanding the systems on the plant floor, understanding the different stakeholders, and being able to tie all of that together to manufacture physical products. So I don't think that there's going to be as much of a negative impact. In fact, I'm seeing quite the opposite. I'm getting a lot of questions, or I'm seeing also a lot of questions on different social media of software engineers and people from other industries trying to come into industrial automation and then realizing how much they actually have to learn before just giving up and moving on to something else. Let's talk about, let me maybe shift us to hardware opportunities, right? So I put that down as a bullet point because I do believe that there's an interesting conversation to be had around, is the hardware basically being innovated on at the same pace as software, or is it lagging behind, right? And of course, the general example is the GPUs that have gained quite substantial value since AI's release. But as far as I can tell, there haven't been, I want to say, major breakthroughs when it comes to CPUs, when it comes to RAM, when it comes to hard drive space, or any of the industrial automation side, right? Any sensors, any, like maybe there's some vision systems. So I'm kind of curious what you're seeing on the hardware side.
Yeah, I I think without some next level of significant breakthrough, we are generally to the point of where we're at on the hardware side, uh, as a whole, right? As a whole, I think we're generally to the level of what we're going to see. We have what, like 3-ish nanometer chips at this point. It's really hard to go make them smaller without some significant breakthrough. In regards to GPUs, we've been fairly stagnant on the GPU side since the NVIDIA, 3090s, maybe 4090s, and that's been several years. We have the 5090s that are out at this point. Having said that, are they just basically a reskin of the 4090s, which may or may not be a reskin of the 3090s? Absolutely. I I feel like we need to set the industrial hardware kind of aside. I think on the industrial hardware side, the value that we're going to see is going and driving some more of these IT servers, is going and driving some more of these AI on-prem, off-prem solutions into the industrial space. But a lot of the value is going to be on the software side. Uh,
Hmm.
as a whole, I think that we will continue to see some innovation. I think that we'll continue to see a lot of innovation as soon as we can go have enough RAM in order to go put more RAM in a lot of these computers to allow pro users and prosumers and a not insignificant level of consumers to overbuy RAM within their hardware so that they can run local models and they can play with local models and they can do all of these things. Again, it's been a very interesting kind of path watching the cost of the RAM get more and more expensive, which is preventing some amount of people from buying. But then you also seemingly have a lot of people panic buying on the Mac side, the Mac Mini, the Mac Studios, overbuying on the MacBook Pros, and like the DGX, the Sparks, and all of the other things that we are seeing with a 200 or 128 gigabytes of unified VRAM in order to go run some of these models. But then you go compare what some of these models look like and the amount of RAM that in theory one would need to be able to go run it at any level similar to a flagship model, and you are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars deep in order to go attempt to run that. So that is the long way around saying is I generally see that we are fairly stagnated, especially on the industrial side, on the controller side, on the hardware side. And we are to the point of we really need more RAM, maybe different models that will allow us to use fewer tokens in order to move through in order to find that next breakthrough. Do you
Right.
imagine
Hmm.
do you think we're going to go find hardware breakthroughs in the near future, or do you think we are a perhaps a hardware based group that is going to live in software defined automation for the next generation of tools?
Well, I would say the short answer is I don't know, right? I certainly have some thoughts, and I'm trying to figure out if there are opportunities on the hardware front. But going back maybe to the introduction of the show, right at Hanover, I have not seen anything that was a complete breakthrough when it comes to, I want to say, traditional manufacturing and more specifically, industrial automation hardware. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of use cases for certain edge applications when it comes to maybe humanoids, when it comes to more advanced pick and place. We had a really good conversation with Francois Giguel on the invention side. And so I can certainly understand how we have gotten better as a result of image recognition that now unlocks easier operation of, let's say, these, again, maybe pick and place applications that in the past were simply too costly to implement and engineer the traditional way. However, if you talk about the current factory, right, as it stands, it would still get the same server that we've had 15, 20 years, right? Maybe with slightly faster processing capacity. We're still going to see the exact same IT rack of switches and routers. I don't believe that there's been any new protocols, as far as I know, even on that front, right? If you take the CCNA for the Cisco suite from 20 years ago and you take it today, the concepts are pretty much the same. Maybe we've gotten more IPv6 addresses in certain instances, even though not in the industrial automation space. Um, I'm trying to think on the PLC side, again, as much as I like the new generation of PLCs from all vendors, one could argue that the physical process, for better or worse, ran relatively similarly on older generations of PLCs, whether that's PLC 5s or the Siemens S7 300s, 400s. Obviously, it was a little bit more troublesome to implement and probably took a little bit more time. But that again is from the software standpoint, right? We're still seeing the same digital analog signals. We're still seeing, specialty modules like RTDs, high speed counters. So I am not sure that there has been much innovation. To be honest with you, I am still thinking of ideas on how it could change. um, I'm trying to think. There's been some safety applications that I saw that were a little bit nicer, right? But they felt like features of a product or maybe
Mhm.
nice to have as opposed to an innovation, right? It was maybe a small
Mhm.
incremental step as opposed to here's a breakthrough of technology. And I think the problem with the manufacturing space as a whole is that if you have a small incremental change, it becomes very difficult to sell that product into an existing end user because at the end of the day, they need to be putting out product out the door. So to make significant changes for a incremental value becomes quite difficult. But I am, again, if there's people in the audience that may think otherwise, I'd be more than happy to discuss and be proven wrong and see if there are potentially interesting opportunities on the hardware side as well.
Vlad, are you familiar with Moore's law?
Yes.
So I guess for the listeners out there, it was proposed by one of the Intel co-founders, Gordon Moore, in 1965. It is the basic observation that when it comes to microchips, that the number of transistors doubles approximately every 2 years, which is also the cost of that is reduced. So you get a significant increase in um, computing power at a reduced cost in order to go ahead and build and therefore go on into delivered to the consumers. And it basically held true for about 60 years. We broke it at some point, I don't know, in 2025, 2026, maybe late 2024, because the transistors were all packed so close together, you run into heat and other issues, which
Hmm.
is when we were talking about 3 nanometer chips. You run into those issues, and at some point, you break the cost structure, which means we need some sort of manufacturing or other innovation in order to go add more silicon to the microchips, in order to be able to go find more computing power and also at a reduced cost, and therefore go solve some of that heat problem. And that's the reason why we have continued to get more and better and less expensive consumer electronics over the last 60 years.
Hmm.
Having said that, and to your point, Vlad, there hasn't been a need or a desire or a demand for that on the industrial space, right? Like, we've all been generally happy to use slightly better versions of the same PLCs for the last 60 years, 70 years, somewhere along those lines. There have certainly been lots of soft PLCs. There have certainly been lots of virtual PLCs running on server racks, but we haven't seen a massive shift or change or transition away from we want the controller that we feel comfortable putting here with the expectation of it lasts 50 years. Uh, kind of built it in the function of we want it to last forever, and in large part because it lasts forever, that there is very little need or desire to go update that, and we continue to software build programs along the lines of we are able to go continue to run on these existing boxes, right? We don't need to suddenly put 256 gigs of RAM in a PLC, because how we write the code, we don't need 256 gigs of RAM. There is no additional marginal value to make them bigger or better because this is just what we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Again, there needs to be pressure to innovate, right? And it seems
Mhm.
that, again, with the advancements of AI, again, whether or not obviously it's implemented on the PLC or an IPC that's running on prem is a question, but I would assume at some point the PLCs will become the bottleneck which is going to be the opportunity maybe to upscale. But I think the question remains when it comes to field hardware, right? So does that follow? Do we need more data? There's protocols in our space that I believe are underutilized. And again, of course, it depends on the use case. But if you talk about things like IO-Link, and even if you talk about traditional Modbus, which is going to be more point to point, you still, in most cases, are not collecting the data. And whether or not you will be able to analyze and do something with the data if you're a small to medium sized manufacturer remains a question to be answered. So we'll see how things progress. I do want to get your thoughts maybe in a very, I think we talked about PLCs, HMIs. Let's maybe focus a little bit of our attention before we kind of close off with a few things on the SCADA, MES, and ERP layers, right? So let me maybe start off a little bit. And what I'm seeing is that many groups have figured out ways to create dashboards faster. What I have been particularly skeptical of is those dashboards being utilized in real environments, right? So I think we should all, I guess, or AI practitioners should see the capability of generating a nicer production ready dashboard or UI. However, I have personally not seen a lot of those implementations in real life being utilized by manufacturing yet. And the same goes for, well, I would say SCADA even more cautiously so because you're impact and control, but MES for data, ERP for data. I'm curious, Dave, if you have seen such applications thus far.
That's a good question. Before I get to that, I guess as a note specifically about IO-Link, IO-Link is 20 years old, Vlad. So it is founded in 2006. So it is certainly not something new within the space. As I am surprised every year that we find people who are introduced to IO-Link for the first time. IO-Link is fantastic. Everyone should use it as a baseline of an Industry 4.0 or digital transformation or IO solution for ease of use and for scalability. It's been around for 20 years. So it is certainly nothing new. I guess for the better part of the last 10 years, have had very specific thoughts and feelings as to what is a good dashboard and what is a bad dashboard. There are lots of really, really ugly dashboards that exist in our space, and I think they should all, like, people should not accept bad, ugly dashboards. We're to the point of they need to be good functional dashboards, and just because it's a SCADA dashboard or just because it's an MES dashboard or just because it's a screen on a manufacturing floor doesn't mean it should be ugly. If it looks good and it functions well and it scales from your phone to your 55-inch television on the plant floor and everything in between, people are going to use them more. From that perspective, I don't really care if we are leveraging AI tools or other tools, or if we're leveraging designers to go help us design within our specifications and architecture guides and design guidelines. I am all for whatever it takes to make better looking solutions end up on the industrial plant floor.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, let us maybe switch gears a little bit. I know we've talked a lot about different technical solutions. This year we have a couple of events planned, and I have a couple of events planned locally here as well. Let's start off maybe with Automate, which we will be both attending as part of Manufacturing Hub. And let me just pull up the dates. It is in June, so Automate
June
2026.
22nd through 25th, I believe, in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah, June 22nd through 25th, Chicago. Again, for those who are unfamiliar, both you and I have been there for the last, what, 4 years now? 5 maybe years?
3 or 4 years, yeah.
And Yeah, and it's one of the largest, also if not the
Hmm.
largest, North American trade show as it relates to industrial automation
Yep.
specifically, right? I believe that IMTS is larger, but it's more CNC and machining.
I think
So we,
IMTS is also every other year. I think Automate being an
Mhm.
annual show now makes it the largest annual automation manufacturing show.
Gotcha. But I guess I don't know if IMTS brands itself as industrial automation or more specifically, again, maybe for a different audience. I have not personally been yet. Perhaps there will be an opportunity. I know it will be in September 14 to 19, also in Chicago.
Okay.
But let's just for a moment focus on Automate, right? So, what are you maybe looking forward to? Can you talk about some of our engagements as well as part of Manufacturing Hub,
Mhm.
just the general landscape of Automate?
Yeah, absolutely. So Automate is one of my most favorite shows every year. I'm excited to go see the groups that we know, meet some groups that we don't necessarily know, go be able to do some networking. For our listeners, if you guys are still listening to Vlad and I rant 65 minutes in, please come up and say hi. We'd love to have a conversation, give you some stickers and take a selfie and do all of those other fun things. But no, overall, it's a fantastic show. It is where almost everyone in our industry gets together in one place, and so I am happy to go ahead and see everyone. As I've said, just about every time we talk about Automate every year, I am continued to be happy that there has been a transition away from just kind of a large raw robotic show, which is what it felt Automate was pre-COVID, into moving into more of a industrial solution. So you still get a bunch of robotics, you still get all the big robotics companies, but you also get all the big automation companies, right? So we've got Beckhoff,
Hmm.
we've got Siemens, we've got Phoenix Contact, and those groups continue to get larger and larger and it can continue to have a larger and larger presence. And then we've got inductive automation. They're bringing their ecosystem there again this year. My understanding is it's a larger booth this year. Again, kind of these groups continue to grow. And then you've got all of the other ecosystem partners that we talk about. I'm sure our friends at Vention are going to have a big booth. They always have a big booth. They always have a really awesome booth. I am sure our friends at MaintainX are going to have a booth, large or otherwise, and then a lot of different ecosystem partners and solutions. So that is really good. I would suggest for everyone, if you've got the ability to go, show up for a day, show up for a couple of days. There are a bunch of really fun after hours events if you do some early planning for that as well. Having said that, plans for Vlad and I. So Vlad and I in manufacturing have plans. Tuesday afternoon, we are planning to be at the Siemens booth, which is booth 1214. And then Wednesday afternoon, we will be with Horner Automation. Their booth is 4303. We're going to shoot some fun content in both of those booths, have some interviews. We'll also have some run up interviews with those groups and probably some other groups as we go and talk about Automate and the importance of Automate. Beyond that, I'm just talking about everyone's plans now, Vlad. Vlad is going to be with the Tigor folks. Their booth 32022, 32022. I don't know. I'm going to say that so many times, I will have to come up with a better way to say that. And Vlad's going to go display some Joltech solutions. Very exciting to go see what Vlad is going to go display. I'll certainly come over and go harass him for a brief period of time and go ask him a whole bunch of difficult solutions on what is running on an IPC and all of that. And then beyond that, I will be in the inductive automation booth with the 4IR group, and which is booth 1673, on and off over the course of the show, in and amongst all of these other things. So very full show. I am excited. I would have probably be slightly more excited if we were 2 weeks away, which is where we normally are at the end of April. But we are now 6 weeks away, which gives us a bunch of time to go have these conversations and talk about it. So very excited for that. Again, we'll have some folks from Horn Automation. I think Chuck. Will we have Chuck back on to go talk in June? We're also going to have Chris Stevens and Anne Marie Brew on from Siemens to go ahead and talk about what they're doing. They're also doing the keynote, so that is exciting. And I have heard that Brian Urlacher, Vlad's favorite Chicago Bear, is going to do the Thursday keynote. And so we know at least one Vlad will be there. Vlad, do you know what sport the Chicago Bears play?
Unfortunately, I do not.
No, thank God. They play football, Vlad. I was, in fact, worried that you would have gotten that right, because it wouldn't have been nearly as funny. But no, so we are going to be there throughout the entire week. If you guys are going to be there, drop us a comment. Drop us a comment when it comes to that. Talking about other shows, Vlad and I together will be at ICC, the Ignition Community Conference, which is again September the 24th through 26th. Sounds right. The 22nd through 24th, somewhere in there. That week in September. Excited to be back there. I'm excited to go chat and see everyone. I'm very excited about some of the changes in format, and I'm very excited to go see some of the exhibition with the new Safe Center, which was a blast last
Wait,
year.
what's the change in format?
I don't know if I can say it yet. There are some different exhibitor showcases and other things like that, but I don't think they've been announced. So we won't be talking about them on Manufacturing Hub at the moment. Vlad, you have a couple of local shows that you're going to go to, right?
Yeah, so as part of, I would say, my general business development for Joltech, I will be attending 2 Montreal-based trade shows, as well as still TBD, but I would say fairly confident I would like to go. But so the local ones are MMTS, or the Montreal Manufacturing Trade Show, as well as ADM. And forgive me not to have memorized the acronym. That's the Advanced Design and Manufacturing Expo, both of which are in Montreal, one of which is going to be in 2 weeks, and the other one is in November 10th to 12th. So if you will be there, don't hesitate to send me a note. Definitely would like to connect. I am currently in the process of reaching out to different groups that will be at the trade show to set up some conversations. And of course, the last one that I have mentioned is going to be the Rockwell Automation Fair. It is still a bit of a TBD, but it is a little bit easier for me to make it over there as it is in Boston this year. Let me just double check the dates. Automation Fair Rockwell, and that's going to be the week after from ADM, which is on November 16th to the 19th in Boston, Massachusetts. So all of those should be very interesting. Again, I have quite a few learnings from Hannover Messe, so I am proactively preparing for all of these trade shows. I think there will be good opportunities, good conversations. If you will be there, absolutely send me a message. Would love to connect and talk about automation, manufacturing, and other things outside of the work environment. But happy to connect. Dave, anything on your radar besides the ones that we have mentioned already?
I've got a couple of things on my radar. There were a couple of shows this year that just did not align with my other commitments, and so those are on my 2027 schedule. I've got a couple of other ones that I'm not going to say until I at least commit tentatively to being there, but a couple on my radar that I am looking at, especially in regards to some of the smaller shows, which, as all of the listeners know, are some of my most favorite, and I try to get to at least a couple of those every year. But no, overall, very excited for this. Vlad, any closing thoughts before we say goodbye to the listeners for today?
No, looking forward to all the events this year. Looking forward to the conversations to come. We will start having our regular theme in a couple of weeks. I know that we took a couple of weeks off, but looking forward to have all of you join the conversations for Manufacturing Hub. Of course, not only in live format, but there's going to be the podcasts being released, videos on YouTube, and a lot of conversations. So don't hesitate to reach out. Always a pleasure to connect.
Absolutely. Agreed with Vlad. My only other comment is if you guys have other conversations, other shows that is worth putting on our radar, please feel free to drop them in the comments or please feel free to let them know. Until next week, if you guys have made it this far, please do all the like, comment, subscribe, follow Vlad, follow Dave, follow Manufacturing Hub, connect with us on YouTube. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, let us know. I see there is at least a couple of you watching in portrait format. So please tell us if you like portrait format, if we should continue to go stream in portrait format, and then follow us along on the podcast form. We will go continue to put those out. And yeah, let us know what you think. Until next week, we'll catch you.